Hello and welcome back to my channel. On this episode of Christian Cringe, we're going to talk about Classically Abby. Yeah, it's about time. I'm getting into the Classically Abby now. I know a lot of other people covered her, but I kind of want to too, so we're going to do it. This first clip I'm going to show you comes from her episode of Bridgerton, where she talks about how you can incorporate Bridgerton, and I firmly disagree with her on most things in her entire thing. But, yeah, she tries to use it in ways that I just kind of like, no. And we'll get into how I disagree with it, why I disagree with it, and why I think she's, ugh. But let's watch the first clip, and I will get back to you.
And classical music. So the way that you can incorporate this into your life is you can listen to classical music. Now that you've heard it and you like it and you kind of think it's fun, you'll be able to approach classical music with a little bit less fear. And once you listen to it a little bit, you'll be able to listen to it a little bit more, and then you'll eventually be listening to it a lot. And it really does make you feel classic and elegant. Having classical music on while you study, or having classical music on while you read, or having classical music on while you are eating dinner with your husband or your fiance or your boyfriend or your family, all of those things really do bring a tad of elegance into your home and will make you feel just...
Okay, so now that you've watched the first clip, I thought we'd start off on a positive note. I actually don't disagree with her for the most part on here. Classical music is awesome. I've always liked classical music. I've listened to it when I study. I listen to it when I am editing photos, because when I was a photographer, I used to edit photos to classical music. Sometimes I listen to it while I'm going to sleep. But at the same time, the beats for the music she's talking about versus classical music are very different. So when telling someone that they have to train themselves to listen to it, I disagree with that. You either like it or you don't. It's not something you train yourself to like, and you shouldn't force yourself to listen to it just so you can feel a little bit more Bridgerton. I do agree with her on the fact classical music is awesome, and if you want to incorporate it in, yes. But the whole training yourself, just listen to it a little bit here, and then you'll find yourself, if you don't like it, don't try to force yourself to be a little bit more Bridgerton. That was like the modern day pop for them. Seriously, classical music was. So if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. I kind of do like it, so I don't disagree with her on the listening to it while you're working. Now, if I tried to listen to it while I was eating dinner with my husband, he'd stab me in the fork with it, or he'd stab me in the eye with a fork, and wouldn't feel bad about it, as he looks at me and smiles and is basically telling me yes. So, yeah. No. If you don't like it, you don't like it. My husband is proof. All right, guys, let's jump on to the next clip.
Number 2 is having good manners and acting like a lady. One of the things that you'll see on these Instagram Reels and TikToks is people going from, oh, I watched Bridgerton, to, hello, grab the carriage, and oh yes, please, turn the channel down, and oh yes, please, I'd love a glass of sherry, you know, that kind of thing. Because there's something really fun about seeing people act in a way that sort of seems foreign to us. It's like very formalized. But the fact is, it doesn't have to be formal to be ladylike. Having good manners never goes out of fashion, and it will only ever help you. I think acting like a lady is something that was entirely appropriate in the Regency era and in Bridgerton, and is something that can totally be transferred into our daily lives nowadays. Being eloquent and thoughtful about the things that we say, addressing people with respect, and having a little bit of formality in the right situations is a really wonderful thing. It makes you feel a little bit more grand. And it's not to say that you are better than anybody else. It's just to say that you feel like you can be taken seriously. And I love that. I think acting like a lady makes me feel like I have so much worth. And I think that that is an invaluable thing for women from the time that they're 9 to the time that they're 99. Women always should feel like they are special, like they have worth. And acting with good manners, acting like a lady, bringing attention to detail, acting like a lady is something that is frowned upon in today's day and age when it absolutely shouldn't be. Being a lady is so important because it shows pride in what we can do and how we behave. And I think that is incredibly lovely. Number 3 is the romantic tension in Bridgerton that everyone is longing for. The main reason for this tension is that everyone in Bridgerton is dating for marriage. Now, I'm not saying that there are not issues in that era where people were getting set up with people who they didn't want to marry and then kind of forced to marry them. I am not saying that any of that is a good thing. But what I'm talking about is the idea that people took marriage seriously and took dating seriously. And when you are dating for marriage, that tension that exists in a show like Bridgerton or even in a movie like Pride and Prejudice exists now, that in a good way, not the bad kind of tension, but the good.
Okay, that clip drives me crazy because it tries to sound innocent and first off, being British isn't a, how do I put this? That isn't manners. So I don't know where she's going with that one, but I want to get into the ladylike statements because I grew up in a conservative environment and I know what they mean when they say ladylike because I was everything that wasn't ladylike, and it can be extremely depressing to be put in that box when you're definitely not. What they're looking for is someone who is quiet and meek and addresses, and when she says formality, men address women as Mr. and Mrs. even though, you're friends and things like. No, that environment is extremely toxic. It is extremely uncomfortable, and it puts women in a position of lesser than. Because again, I grew up in it, and one of the things that was always told was, you're not walking ladylike because your hips move too much. You're not being ladylike enough because you're being too opinionated and too loud. It's not what you're supposed to do. That's what being ladylike is code for in environments like this. We absolutely shouldn't be pushing young girls to be silent, to not have opinions because they're worried that they're not going to be considered manners, and to be extremely formal and rigid. That's not, no, just no, it's no. I remember how much trauma that actually put on me. I remember crying and trying to fix the way I walked, which was just how I walked, because it wasn't ladylike enough. And my voice wasn't ladylike enough. It was too loud and it bothered the men. I still get upset when people tell me I'm loud. I don't know when I'm being loud, but there are certain things that people can say that still really upset me because of the trauma of people trying to force me into a box that I just didn't fit in. And I hate when people push that. Be more ladylike in the conservative way. And you're going to see some other things that we're about to talk about here in just a minute. All right, let's jump on to the next clip.
Is the romantic tension in Bridgerton that everyone is longing for. The main reason for this tension is that everyone in Bridgerton is dating for marriage. Now, I'm not saying that there are not issues in that era where people were getting set up with people who they didn't want to marry and then kind of forced to marry them. I am not saying that any of that is a good thing. But what I'm talking about is the idea that people took marriage seriously and took dating seriously. And when you are dating for marriage, that tension that exists in a show like Bridgerton or even in a movie like Pride and Prejudice exists now, that in a good way, not the bad kind of tension, but the good kind of romantic tension, the kind of tension that builds because you know that this is building towards something and it's exciting and it's new and it's taking a relationship in the right order, as opposed to Tinder dating and swiping and hooking up with a bunch of different people and not building romantic tension in the same way. The reason that a hand touch or taking someone's arm in a Pride and Prejudice kind of movie or in Bridgerton is so romantic is because they take touching seriously. They treat it with the respect it deserves. The relationship between men and women has weight. And I think that that is something that is so well played out in a show like Bridgerton. And the reason there's romantic tension in a show like Bridgerton is because these things are taken seriously. Now, this can be brought into nowadays because we can date for marriage. As somebody who is a proponent of dating for marriage.
And of course, where would we be if we weren't pushing toxic purity culture? She glosses over a bunch of stuff here. So let's just do this. First off, she talks about, she glosses over the fact that women were basically handed out like property and cattle and were made to make connections. Love connections back then weren't that common. It was a marriage for situation kind of deal. And men had the final say on who women married. Women would not have that say at all. So let's not gloss over that. But she then goes to talk about dating for marriage. And she doesn't mention the fact that she and others put so much worth on women and their virginity that they lose value once they no longer have that. Men don't lose value when but women do. They're considerably less valuable once they've had that taken away. That's literally what she's saying here. Our self-worth is not tied in to how many partners we have had. It makes no difference if we've slept with our husband 100 times or we've slept with 100 different men. As long as you're safe about it and you don't have STDs, there's literally no difference. And then she goes on the whole like Tinder dating where you're not dating. Lots of people make connections on online dating. You know where I met my husband? I met my husband via an online dating website, and we've been married for 4 years, together for 8. We also lived together before we were married, and yeah, we did it. Surprise! And the funny thing is, she then tries to equate not doing that to that touch, that romantic feeling and touch. I get that from my husband before we even were serious. Scratches, hand holding, things like that still built a connection and still built intimacy. It wasn't special just because we weren't, because we were. And it was still getting that same amount of rush. It was. So, no. Then she talks about, or she doesn't talk about the fact that with no experience, you don't know what your partner wants, you don't know what you want. And a lot of people that are in this purity culture situation put so much value on it and they think it's just going to work out, and they're trained to not talk about sex, to not like sex, things like that. And to her credit, she does say that you should have the conversations with people, but when you push purity culture, that's not going to happen. In most cases, it's not going to happen. You're going to get the Bridgerton version where girls don't know jack squat. I grew up in conservativeness. I would know. Seriously, the book I Kiss Dating Goodbye. Go read it and then come back to me on purity culture. Women need to know, and that conversation needs to be had. Just like a lot of the coded words, like dating for marriage, means that you're not one-on-one with this person. And if you are one-on-one with a guy, just like in Bridgerton, you are ruined. And you don't get that connection. You don't get to know your spouse when you're in a group of 10 people. You don't get that intimacy. So you're going into this marriage not really knowing the person that you're married to. And then if you're part of the purity culture, it's very hard for you to get out. That is infuriating that she is pushing this and using a popular series to do it. I promise you, I had the same romantic connections with my husband and we were just fine. All right, guys, next clip.
Still have that same sort of romantic tension as they do on Bridgerton. Even though I don't like that there are a lot of sex scenes in Bridgerton, one of the things I think people are into about the show is the fact that Daphne, who is one of the main characters, is a virgin on her wedding night and how romantic it is for her. Hello! Of course we can bring this into today's day and age. As somebody who is a proponent of waiting until marriage, you can have that same experience. Daphne's character is incredibly sheltered, and I honestly think that that intimate scene, which I'm not a proponent of watching, is very inaccurate to what probably would have actually been her experience as someone who had no idea what was going on. I would probably guess that she'd be giggling quite a bit more than she was in that scene. But in any case, it is so special to wait until marriage and to share that experience with your husband for the first time, and to know that when you do have sex for the first time, you're
have more abstinence progression. Nobody is thinking that. Nobody I know is thinking that when they watch that. No one, I promise you, is thinking, oh, it's so romantic that she was a No. This is something she's making up to push her little abstinence agenda, which we just discussed. No, nobody, and I mean nobody, I do think it's kind of funny that she's not a proponent of watching those scenes, because when I was a kid and shows came out and things like that, in purity culture, when things like that would happen, you'd be allowed to watch it, but they would have to fast forward and stand in front of the TV while the scene was going on, because they were afraid that you would, end up with a lustful mind or something. And when she said that, it made me giggle. I'm not gonna lie, that brought me back to my childhood and extremely conservative family members standing in front of the TV and fast forwarding through scenes that you couldn't even see anything in. Like, they weren't like this, but it brought me there, and I thought it was funny. But again, if you want to wait to marriage, that's fine. I really don't. But to push it on other girls, especially saying that it gives you this extra bit of romance or whatever, it doesn't. From someone with experience, it doesn't. And the fact that she's pushing it, and purity culture is so dangerous to young girls, that is a problem. That is an absolute problem. The other thing I would like to say I agree with her on is the giggling, because I guarantee you, had she not had any education, it would have been a lot of giggling and confusion. So, I mean, I agree with her on that, and that is, again, why sexual education is so important, and it should be taught, and we should have access to contraceptives. But that's a conversation for a different day.
The Regency lady. Now, we can't dress in beautiful gowns every day because it's just not socially acceptable, unfortunately. Whoever decided that we were not going to wear gowns anymore, I know the whole history, but whoever decided, we have a beef. Not a huge fan about that, because now we have to wear athleisure half the time, or at least many people choose to. But in any case, dressing like a lady can 100% be a part of your ladylike life. Dressing like a lady is something that you can totally incorporate into your life, and it's something that I love doing. You don't have to just have a Regency era gown to feel beautiful. There are so many beautiful dresses, beautiful tops and pants that look wonderful and make you feel put together and ladylike. And I think that this is something that is really, I understand why women are looking to Bridgerton and saying, I wish my life were like this, because they haven't been taught the value of embracing their femininity, the value of embracing their womanhood, and the value of embracing being a lady. So when they watch a show like this, they just long for something that to them feels totally out of reach and doesn't feel like they could actually accomplish. When you can dress well every day. You can take care of your looks and feel beautiful every single day. Now, does that mean that you have to have an hour and a half to get ready every morning? Absolutely not. But you can decide what will make you feel beautiful and like a lady and incorporate that into your everyday. And my point isn't necessarily that you have to do your hair and have to do your makeup and have to wear a certain thing to feel like a lady. I think that there is some flexibility and there is a spectrum. For me, part of feeling like a lady is doing a full face of makeup, but for another woman, it might just be throwing on some mascara and some lip balm, and she would still feel beautiful. And I think that is so important, is knowing that you can be a lady every single day. But I think the reason so many women watch Bridgerton and wish that this is something they could have and long for it is because it feels like a fantasy. It feels like this is something that they can't incorporate into their everyday. And being a lady is something that you can do every day and feel every day and be every day. So those are the 5 reasons I think that Bridgerton is much more available to us than women might realize. And watching Bridgerton just made me realize how many women long to be ladies, but don't necessarily give themselves the opportunity. And I hope that this gives a little bit of insight into the fact that you can absolutely feel like a woman and feel like a lady, even if you're not in the Regency era. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'd love to have you join the classic crew, and make sure to ring that notification bell to get notified of all my new videos. Make sure to subscribe to my newsletter.
Okay, so in this, she talks about dressing like a lady and being appropriate. And she gets real hyper and real bitter when she talks about women going out in leisure wear. And then she goes on to say that, you know, a nice top or a dress and some pants, and always make sure that you're dressed ladylike. That's code for modestly and professionally dressed. And how, again, do I know this? Because I grew up in that environment, and it was khaki pants and a nice top, no jeans, your hair was worn a certain way, and if you did wear makeup, it had to be a very specific style of makeup. Like, what I am wearing on my face would not be considered ladylike. It would be considered whorish. She then goes on to talk about how that it's all about making yourself comfortable, which is something I agree with. But what she describes as comfortable and ladylike is not what every other woman is going to define as comfortable and ladylike. And she tries to emphasize leisure wear bad, fancy tops and dresses good. And that drives me crazy because it puts an unreal expectation on women. There are some women I know that don't like to go out in anything other than their pajama pants, and no one cares. I don't care. As long as they're not in a professional setting, no one cares. She then talks about you don't have to have a full face of makeup. And again, I agree with her there. But I also don't agree with the fact that she's like, well, some girls just get comfortable with mascara and lip balm. Like, she can't imagine anybody going out with just the face they have. I don't go out very often with makeup on. I do makeup for YouTube and I have fun with it, but most of the time it's just me playing in it. But if I'm out with my husband or whatever, I throw my hair up in a messy bun, put on a pair of leggings and a t-shirt, and I go about my day because that's what makes me happy. So maybe stop telling women that the only appropriate way to dress ladylike is to wear khaki pants, dresses, things like that. And I know she didn't say khaki. I'm just putting my own experience in with that because I know the conservativeness. But, yeah, I also want to address one more thing. She talks about all of the scenes, the sex scenes in Bridgerton, but yet she doesn't mention the assault that Daphne does. He asked Daphne to, I can't watch the whole scene. I know what the scene is. I can't watch it. He asks Daphne to stop, and Daphne refuses to. And I get she feels lied to and she's angry, but that's assault. And I was really hoping Abby would have the foresight to mention it, and she didn't. I watched the whole video through, and not once did I see her mention it. So I have a real and genuine problem with that. She should have brought that up. That is an actual thing that happens when someone says stop. Even if you're in the middle of it, you have to stop. And if you don't stop, it's assault. So, you know, if we're going to teach purity culture, can we please at least teach that that is assault? Because it is, and it's totally wrong, and that actually has me disgusted with the whole series. I can't look at Daphne after that. So, yeah, that should have been mentioned. All right, guys, I will see you later.